Ed forgot his focus. We need to rip the engine out of that Corvette. He's going, I don't need to do that. I'm a TV star. He did some very bad things, and then when he did some very bad things, it meant that Discovery Channel just couldn't work with him anymore. So they gave him the option to leave, and he took it.
In 2017, one of automotive television's most successful partnerships suddenly fractured in plain sight, but without a clear public fight. Without a dramatic on-screen collapse, and without the kind of explosive breakup viewers expected from a show built on tension and transformation. Instead, the exit of Edd China from Wheeler Dealers after 13 years alongside Mike Brewer unfolded like a quiet system failure. So, what really happened between Edd China and Mike Brewer? Today, we'll unveil everything. Let's start from the very beginning. The formula that changed car TV. In 2003, a new kind of automotive television quietly rolled onto screens in the United Kingdom with a concept that looked almost too simple to survive long-term. The show was Wheeler Dealers, built around a transactional loop that felt more like a real-world business experiment than entertainment. At the center of it were two men with completely different instincts. Mike Brewer, a fast-talking dealer with a sharp eye for undervalued vehicles, and Edd China, an engineer whose approach to cars was slow, methodical, and deeply technical. Brewer bought the car, China fixed it, and the margin between purchase price, repair cost, and resale value determined success or failure. The structure of Wheeler Dealers was deceptively rigid, almost like a lab experiment disguised as reality TV. Every episode began with acquisition. Brewer would hunt through classifieds, auctions, and private sellers, often securing vehicles that were old, worn, or mechanically compromised. The budget constraint was central. Each car had to be revived and resold for profit, meaning every part installed, every hour spent, and every decision made by China carried financial weight. This transformed the workshop from a restoration space into a controlled economic system where engineering decisions were constantly filtered through cost efficiency. What made the format stand out in 2003 was not just the trading concept, but the way it divided expertise into two completely different worlds. Brewer operated in negotiation, persuasion, and instinct-driven valuation. China operated in engineering logic, diagnostics, and mechanical precision. On paper, they were opposites placed on the same conveyor belt of automotive restoration. On screen, however, that contrast became the engine of the show's identity. Brewer's urgency collided with China's patience, and that friction became structured storytelling rather than conflict. As the early seasons developed, something unexpected happened. The rise of a cult, mechanical identity. Between 2004 and 2012, Wheeler Dealers underwent a gradual but decisive transformation, shifting from a niche UAE car flipping format into a globally recognized mechanical institution. The engineering process itself became the primary attraction, not just the resale outcome. By the mid-2000s, the series had already moved beyond its early buy, fix, sell simplicity. In episodes such as the early classic car restorations, including recurring formats like mini rebuilds and older Jaguar and Porsche builds seen across seasons 2 through 6, China's workshop segments stopped functioning as brief repair interludes and instead became structured mechanical dissections. Engines were routinely stripped down on camera, with faults identified in sequence rather than summarized. A worn head gasket, a seized brake caliper, or a failing alternator was no longer just a line item in a budget. It became a full narrative sequence showing cause, effect, and repair logic in real time. This change altered how viewers consumed the show. Many were no longer primarily invested in whether Brewer achieved a profitable sale. They were increasingly drawn to the workshop process itself. China's segments, often filmed in extended workshop sessions and later tightly edited for broadcast, began to function like practical engineering demonstrations. He would isolate a fault, explain its mechanical role, demonstrate disassembly, and then rebuild the system step by step. This methodical breakdown contrasted sharply with Brewer's faster-paced dealership segments, where negotiation and acquisition happened under time pressure and market urgency. During this same period, the production scale of wheeler-dealers expanded significantly. What had started as a UK-focused format increasingly reached international audiences through broader distribution across Europe and later other global markets. As the audience base grew, production expectations tightened. Episodes had to maintain a consistent structure: purchase, workshop diagnosis, repair, and resale within fixed runtimes. Plus, there were increasingly standardized budgets. By the time the series entered its 2006 to 2010 phase, this structure had become highly formalized. Budgets were explicitly defined per episode, often with a clear separation between purchase price and refurbishment costs. Every mechanical decision carried direct financial implications, turning the show into a running demonstration of applied automotive economics. Parts were itemized on screen, costs were tracked throughout builds, and profit margins were revealed at the end. China's workshop role thus became structurally essential. These segments became the core determinant of whether a build succeeded or failed within budget. A misdiagnosed fault could escalate costs and erase projected profit. A well-executed repair could preserve or increase the margin. This created a rare form of narrative tension in factual television, not driven by interpersonal drama, but by mechanical risk and budget constraint. In episodes across seasons 5 through 9, the viewer experience consistently alternated between high-tempo sourcing segments and slow, methodical workshop builds. The rhythm itself became predictable, but the technical content within China's segments remained the variable that sustained viewer engagement. Each repair carried uncertainty. Would a gearbox rebuild stay within budget? Would sourcing parts delay completion? Would some hidden faults appear during teardown? Rather than simply performing repairs, China constructed step-by-step logic chains. What failed, why it failed, how the system functioned, what would prevent recurrence. This turned the workshop into a structured learning environment, but it also led to more problems. Pressure behind the scenes. Between 2013 and 2016, wheeler dealers entered a more pressured phase of production, where the on-screen formula still appeared stable, but the behind-the-scenes mechanics of how those episodes were built began to change in measurable ways. Production had evolved into a highly coordinated process involving multiple overlapping stages that extended far beyond what viewers saw on screen. Episodes were no longer filmed in a linear buy-then-fix sequence alone. Instead, pre-production sourcing, workshop planning, parts procurement, and filming logistics often ran in parallel. Filming during these years was increasingly demanding, with extended shooting days becoming routine. Although exact schedules varied by episode and location, the format's structure required repeated travel for car inspections, auction visits, workshop filming sessions, and final valuation segments. What appeared on screen as a clean 45 to 50-minute narrative was, in reality, assembled from significantly longer production windows, often requiring extensive shooting to capture usable material for each stage of the build. The workshop began to feel this pressure most directly. China's detailed repair sequences, which in earlier seasons had been given substantial screen time for full diagnostic breakdowns, were increasingly subject to tighter editorial constraints. Complex mechanical explanations still existed within filming, but the time allocated to them in the final cut became more selective. Instead of extended step-by-step coverage of every subsystem, certain repairs were increasingly condensed into key highlights: fault identification, major corrective action, and final testing. This change was not purely editorial preference, but reflected broader production realities. As Wheeler Dealers expanded its international distribution footprint, the emphasis on pacing and accessibility increased. In interviews and behind-the-scenes commentary from this era, production teams broadly acknowledged the need to maintain viewer engagement across different markets, many of which favored faster narrative progression and shorter informational segments. The result was a gradual recalibration of how much technical detail could remain on screen without slowing episode flow. Naturally, the contrast between the show's two central roles became more pronounced. Mike Brewer operated in a segment naturally aligned with fast pacing, car sourcing, negotiation, and acquisition. In contrast, Edd China worked in a segment that inherently required time, diagnosing faults, dismantling systems, and rebuilding mechanical components with accuracy. As production tightened, this difference became increasingly difficult to balance within a fixed runtime. By the mid-2010s, workshop sequences, while still central to the format, were under increasing pressure to justify their duration within tightly structured 45 to 50-minute episodes. Editorial decisions began emphasizing progression milestones rather than exhaustive mechanical walkthroughs. Instead of extended coverage of every diagnostic step, episodes increasingly focused on key turning points in a repair. At the same time, broader media consumption trends influenced how automotive television was being structured. The rise of digital platforms, online tutorials, and shorter-form automotive content meant that traditional television formats faced growing pressure to deliver more immediate narrative payoff. Within this environment, shows like Wheeler Dealers had to maintain technical credibility while also adapting to shifting audience expectations for pace and clarity. Inside production, this resulted in a constant balancing act. China's role depended heavily on explaining mechanical systems clearly enough to maintain the show's educational identity, while production requirements increasingly prioritized narrative efficiency. Logistically, production also became more compressed and interdependent. Multiple episodes were often in different stages of development simultaneously, requiring careful coordination between sourcing vehicles, transporting them to workshop locations, and ensuring parts availability before filming windows. Delays in diagnosis or repair could cascade into scheduling adjustments for subsequent episodes, placing additional pressure on efficiency across the entire production pipeline. This operational reality fed directly into creative decision-making. Workshop segments that once allowed extended exploration of systems began focusing more tightly on core narrative functions, identifying faults, executing repairs, and verifying outcomes. Extended explanatory detours, while still present during filming, were more likely to be reduced in final edits unless they were essential to understanding the repair outcome or cost implications. By 2015, these cumulative adjustments had begun to reshape the overall tone of production. While Wheeler Dealers still presented itself as a hands-on restoration format, its internal rhythm had become noticeably more structured. The tension was building, one episode at a time. The breaking point in production direction. For over a decade, the show's reputation had been built on engineering visibility. Faults were shown, parts were named, costs were broken down, and repairs were explained in real time by Edd China. Any reduction in that transparency risked weakening the very credibility that separated it from standard car flip entertainment. As one long-running production principle often cited in behind-the-scenes discussions framed it, the format depended on showing the work, not just the result. In interviews given after his departure, China repeatedly emphasized that his concern was not simply about airtime, but about the accuracy of representation. He argued that when complex mechanical work is condensed too aggressively, viewers lose the ability to understand why a repair was necessary. In his words, the workshop risked becoming a summary of what was done rather than a demonstration of how and why it was done, a distinction that became central to his position. At the same time, Mike Brewer acknowledged in later commentary that production on a long-running series inevitably evolves under broadcaster expectations and scheduling demands. In a 2017 interview following China's exit, Brewer stated that the working environment had become increasingly pressured over time, describing long filming schedules and growing production complexity. He rejected claims of a single explosive incident, instead characterizing the situation as a gradual buildup of workload pressure and differing views on how the show should move forward. Behind the scenes, production changes were not isolated to editing decisions. The series had expanded internationally through Discovery's global network, and later US-focused iterations under Velocity branding placed greater emphasis on faster storytelling and broader audience readability. This meant workshop segments, traditionally the most technically dense part of the show, were increasingly evaluated not just on accuracy, but on pacing and accessibility across multiple markets. The practical outcome was a steady reduction in how long individual diagnostic sequences could run on screen. China's pushback, as described in retrospective accounts and fan discussions referencing his public statements, centered on preserving the integrity of visible engineering. He consistently maintained that automotive repair television carried an implicit educational responsibility. Without step-by-step visibility into faults and fixes, the viewer could no longer verify or fully understand the process. By 2016, the workshop had become a contested space between two production philosophies. One prioritized modernization, shorter sequences, faster transitions, and streamlined narrative arcs designed for global television pacing. The other prioritized transparency, full diagnostic sequences, visible component failure analysis, and step-by-step mechanical reasoning. Both approaches were logically consistent, but they increasingly pulled the format in opposite directions. Within this environment, even small editorial choices carried structural weight. The decision to cut a diagnostic step or condense a repair sequence was no longer just about timing. It altered how the mechanical logic of an entire episode was perceived. A gearbox rebuild, for example, might be shown as a sequence of key stages rather than a continuous breakdown of failure analysis, reassembly, and testing. For China, this reduction affected not just storytelling clarity but the educational integrity of the work itself. By 2017, the accumulated pressure reached a critical threshold. The show's structure had not collapsed, but it had tightened significantly. Every episode now operated under stricter constraints. How much time could be spent diagnosing a fault, how many repair steps could be shown in full, and how much technical reasoning could remain in the final cut. The exit that shocked fans. In 2017, after 13 years on Wheeler Dealers, Edd China officially exited the program, closing a long-running on-screen partnership with Mike Brewer that had defined the series since its 2003 debut. The departure did not unfold as a televised rupture or public dispute. Instead, it arrived as a formal announcement that immediately reframed how viewers interpreted years of gradual behind-the-scenes production change. What had looked like a stable format on screen was, in hindsight, already under structural pressure. China's explanation for leaving remained consistent in public statements and interviews. He said he wanted to pursue other projects and continue work aligned with his engineering standards and communication style. His role had been built around visible technical transparency, such as showing faults, explaining systems, and walking viewers through repairs step by step. Over the preceding years, workshop segments had already been subject to tighter editing and reduced explanatory runtime, and his exit was widely interpreted by audiences as the endpoint of that longer compression rather than a sudden decision. When the news broke, the audience reaction was immediate and unusually intense for a technical lifestyle series. Viewers who had followed the show for over a decade reacted less to the concept of a cast change and more to the removal of what they perceived as its instructional core. China's workshop sequences had become the most distinctive part of the format. As the announcement circulated, online communities quickly filled with speculation, with some questioning whether the decision had been entirely voluntary, while others assumed production disagreement was involved. The lack of a visible on-screen breakdown between the two presenters contributed heavily to that uncertainty. Because there was no televised conflict, no farewell episode framed as a confrontation, and no explicit explanation of internal disagreements, viewers began reconstructing narratives from fragments of production evolution. But there was no conflict, no quarrel. After China's departure, production of Wheeler Dealers continued with Ant Anstead stepping in as the new workshop presenter. Structurally, the show retained its core format. vehicle acquisition, workshop restoration, and resale. But the tonal balance of the workshop changed in ways longtime viewers immediately noticed. Following the departure of Edd China, several consistent editing shifts were observed by viewers across later seasons. The most noticeable change was the reduction of continuous, step-by-step workshop coverage. During China's tenure, repairs were often shown as full sequences, such as fault diagnosis, disassembly, repair, and reassembly, explained in detail. After 2017, episodes more frequently jumped between key milestones, such as problem identified, major component replaced, and car tested, rather than showing the entire mechanical process in real time. The technical explanation was also shortened. China's era included extended breakdowns of how systems worked and why failures occurred. Later episodes relied more on brief voiceovers or condensed summaries, focusing on what was done rather than detailed mechanical reasoning. Editing also became more intercut, with workshop scenes frequently broken up by sourcing or recap segments. Cost breakdowns were still present, but were less central to on-screen explanation. With Aunt Anstead as workshop presenter, the tone leaned more toward demonstration and results than deep diagnostic teaching. As the transition unfolded, Mike Brewer addressed the situation publicly in interviews, rejecting the idea of a sudden or dramatic incident behind the split. He described the departure as the result of accumulated production pressure, demanding schedules, and evolving creative expectations within a long-running series. His framing emphasized process over conflict, portraying the change as the outcome of a gradually intensifying working environment rather than a single point of rupture. Both Brewer and China maintained a consistent tone in later comments: professional respect, acknowledgement of differences, and avoidance of personal escalation. Brewer pushed back against online narratives that suggested betrayal or firing, while China focused his explanations on creative direction and the importance of maintaining technical clarity in his work. Neither publicly described the relationship in hostile terms, and both continued to reference the success of their long collaboration in neutral or positive language. Following the cast change, discussion around the show shifted heavily toward comparison between eras. Longtime viewers frequently contrasted earlier seasons, where workshop explanations were longer and more detailed, with later episodes where pacing was more compressed and repair sequences were more selectively edited. Even without official confirmation of a formal change in editorial philosophy, audience perception increasingly framed the pre-2017 and post-2017 versions of the show as distinct phases with different priorities. The departure had moved beyond a casting update and into a broader cultural reference point within automotive television. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.